So let's dig a little further into those numbers of that blue wave. The latest numbers show Democrats won the popular vote in the House by 5.9 percentage points and could grow as high as 7%. That would be more than 3 times Hillary Clinton's margin of 2.1% in 2016.
But Donald Trump did say, this election is all about me.
It was all about him and Trumpism, and it actually was a blue wave.
So
and the president.
He lost the popular vote in 16, but you're telling me, Mika, from these numbers that you just said, he did 3 times as worse in 2018 after people got to see what he did.
You could tell in his mood the day after at that crazy press conference that perhaps he did actually know that these numbers were turning against him. As this New York Times map illustrates.
That's 6 million. Donald Trump lost by 6 million votes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
317 of the 435 districts moved toward the Democrats from 2016. The Cook Political Report's Dave Wasserman breaks it down this way. In 2006, 2010, the party riding the wave won an average of 57% of toss-ups, 19% of opposite leans, and 9% of opposite likely races. In 2018, Democrats won or are leading in 57% of toss-ups, 7% of lean Republican races, and 3% of likely races. Quote, in the House, this was a wave. And here's one example yesterday. Republican Congresswoman Karen Handel conceded in Georgia's 6th district, the seat once held by Newt Gingrich, and where a multi-million-dollar special election battle took place in 2017. Handel was defeated by Democratic newcomer Lucy McBath, a former flight attendant, breast cancer survivor, and a gun control advocate, whose teenage son, Jordan Davis, was shot and killed in 2012 following a dispute over music at a gas station.
So, Susan, we're already seeing the impact in the United States Senate of Donald Trump's humiliating loss on Tuesday. And we're seeing it in the form of senators that clearly went to Mitch McConnell yesterday and said, no, we're not following Donald Trump over a cliff. You know, if you're Cory Gardner, you're going, you know what, I don't live in Missouri. I live in Colorado and I'm up in 2 years, right? If you're Susan Collins, you go, guess what? I don't live in Indiana. I live in Maine. I'm up in 2 years. That garbage that you've been preaching for 2 years, that's not going to work. And suddenly, the emperor has no clothes. They don't fear him. And Mitch McConnell came out yesterday and clearly said, no, we're not going to stop the Mueller investigation. Donald Trump, as we all said, has awakened to a new reality in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, George Bush said that he took a thumping. Barack Obama said there was a shellacking. Well, it looks like there was a trumping. All of these Democrats were trumped. They were, they really were able to pull through. And I think the other thing when it comes to the Senate is when you look at the loud voices that are going to be in the House on the Republican side, there's actually going to be a fight for leadership, which is a frightening thought. And there's a good possibility the Freedom Caucus may even grow and become stronger within the minority. That's going to have the Senate with, really reacting, I think, in strong opposition to going too far off that cliff.
Yeah, and Eugene, we've seen that again in the Mueller investigation, where you'll have the Freedom Caucus attacking Robert Mueller, spinning their own conspiracy theories about Rod Rosenstein, and then Chairman Burr from North Carolina, another swing state, will go, no, actually, Russia interfered in the election. First of all, what's your takeaway from what we're seeing evolving from Tuesday night? And also, how much tougher is it going to be for Donald Trump over the next 2 years?
Indeed, I think what we're seeing from Tuesday night, it's many of the groups that people wondered whether or not they would come out actually showed up. Millennials, young voters showed up. People of color showed up. Women who we knew were going to show up really showed up. And they had a message, and they said where the country is going in this direction, it's not where we want it to go. And that was a message directed to the president and to Republicans, but also to Democrats. And I think they gave them ideas and hope and an agenda to say you can push harder than perhaps you thought you could before, and that you perhaps were afraid of doing. This is something that should terrify Trump. this is something that someone who thought he had a mandate in 2016, oddly, despite not actually winning the popular vote, should now know he certainly does not have a mandate to do. And I think what'll be really interesting is seeing whether or not the Republican lawmakers that are in Congress stick with the base, who is still with Trump, or if they realize, hey, we actually have a lot of people we have to represent in our respective districts that are not on the Trump train.
Yeah, and you know, Caddy, Republicans are still, despite having one of the most favorable Senate maps in recent history, they're still sitting at 51. They may lose Florida. They may lose Arizona. It certainly looks like they're going to lose one of those two. If that's the case, a Senate year that should have left them with 54, 55 seats suddenly be almost gridlocked. And while everybody's looking forward to the 2020 election to see who's running for president, it's all of those Republicans, 2-1 Republicans in blue states that are having to run for re-election in 2 years, that will never win as Trump-style candidates, that may have more of an impact on how Washington's run over the next 2 years than any presidential campaign.
Yeah, 48 hours after the vote, this looks very different than it did on election night, and Democrats certainly have a lot more to celebrate, both in the House and potentially in the Senate as well. And those Republicans who are up in bluish states in 2020 have to be looking at the demographics that came out of the midterm night and say to themselves, this is a really tough time for Republicans. Yes, Donald Trump seems to be this rather formidable candidate with his base. He can get that big chunk of people out, and that certainly helps him. But let's take Donald Trump out of the equation and look at what the country looks like at the moment for Republicans, and it doesn't look good. If you don't have a Trump-like candidate who is the standard bearer, who is flying around the country and rallying white, often largely male voters in conservative rural areas of the country, then the list clearly looks better. The map of the country at the moment just clearly looks better for Democrats. Democrats are growing in the areas where the country is growing, amongst minorities and in the suburbs.
And the news gets worse for Republicans actually going into 2020. They all know what I've always known, what I've always said, which is kind of keep your head down and make it survive to the off-year election, because the voters are always older, whiter, and more conservative. And this wave happened in an off-year election. The electorate expands. More women will go out. More Hispanics will go out. More black voters will go out. I mean, the Democratic coalition only expands 2 years from now. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.